Welcome to another CEOism podcast. We have Thomas L. Doorley with us, the third. Thomas is the founder, chair emeritus of Sage Partners, a podcast host on growth. It's called Sage Insights. He's in Boston, Massachusetts. Has a long bio, quite successful business person, 25 years at Sage Partners. Also been board leadership forum at Deloitte, has been a director at countless companies. So we're going to cover that today, Tom's background and everything he's accomplished and lessons that he has for us, wisdom more specifically. But before we do, podfire.com is presenting this podcast. Podfire is my podcasting company. If you need help with your own podcast, lift it off the ground, generate leads, AdSense money, sponsors from your podcast, can go to podfire.com. Tom, welcome to the podcast. Tell me a bit more about yourself and what you're up to nowadays.
Great. It's good to be with you, Charles. I look forward to this conversation. And I like that you set it up as a conversation as opposed to an interview. So we're going to talk back and forth and see how it goes. So I've been a management consultant all my career. Oddly enough, I was an engineer as an undergraduate, go to business school at Columbia, take up marketing, and all of a sudden, along comes a fellow with a consulting firm, and I said, why don't I try it? And turns out I actually love it. I set up my own firm called Braxton Associates. After working for about 7 years, we merged that into Deloitte Consulting. And I take pride in the fact, and this is actually a difficult thing to do, it was a very, very well done merger. We put the firms together. We were smaller. They were larger. We did not lose our place, did not lose our culture. And in fact, each of us influenced the other. So one of the things I've learned about mergers and acquisitions, which I do a lot of, is it's not just about the front end. Does this look like an interesting company? Can you find a valuation that you can make a deal with and all that sort of thing? It's all about what happens after you close. And then at a point in the Deloitte area, they say, hey, you're too old. You got to go off and do something else. And so I've set up Sage Partners with Deloitte's help and have been doing that for a couple of decades now.
Very cool. And yeah, that's the exception, right? Like in mergers, normally it's much of a shit show. So what would you attribute your successful merging with that larger company?
So several different things. One is we spent a lot of time beforehand talking about what life is going to like afterhand. And that's really important. So we talked about I was going to be a member of the management committee and representing our firm, even such things as what we're going to call it. We're going to continue to call it Braxton like we did before. And we had a good brand, and that was important. And we talked about how we were going to influence Deloitte. And it included new offices and all that sort of thing, identifying people who could do our work, training them. But it was really important to sort of lay out the basics of what life would look like after the fact. Didn't do it perfectly, of course. And there's some things that we do differently. But by and large, we ended up finding a way to make it work. And professional service firms are curious things, very people-centric. Any people-centric firm is a curious thing. So you got to make sure that people work, and we did that.
And tell me about the various transformations that Deloitte went through over the last decades and how are they gonna adapt to the AI age that's currently happening?
Yeah, well, that's really an important thing. They put a lot of effort into doing two things. One is training just about everybody in terms of knowing something about how to use AI. But the other thing they've done, which is good, is they've set up centers of excellence, groups of people, small groups, 4 or 5 people located around the world, which are experts. So if I'm somewhere in the Boston office and I'm struggling with something, there's somebody I can call. And that's really important. The other thing is, and this is one thing that I've learned in my years, that to make a big change, the CEO has to own that change. So you can't say with AI, hey, let's go get some AI here, right? And tell the technical staff, whatever you have to do, do it. The CEO has to know what they want, what's going to happen, where they're going to put it. Otherwise, it's suboptimal. You get a little bit of this, a little bit of this, but you don't do the big stuff.
And what makes a great CEO in 2025 and in the next AI decades that we're going to live through?
Sure, a couple of things. One of the things is that person must be authentic. Folks come into the world these days maybe a little more cynical than they did back in my time. And if you talk to them, in sound bites. If you talk to them at stuff that is scripted by ChatGPT or Copilot or whatever, they see through that, and they say, no, this isn't a real person. This isn't a person I can trust. And in order to follow a CEO, you got to trust that person. In order to trust them, they have to be authentic.
Love that. And what makes a great consultant is it just being a great problem solver, and what consultant human skills will drive vs AI agent skills that are becoming the norm nowadays?
Sure. First of all, you have to be able to be very broad in your thinking, because AI and other things can hit in lots of places, but you have to be able to go deep quickly. So you start getting to the area of the problem. But one thing I've also felt was the most important thing for a really effective consultant, and this goes back to the authentic thing, is you have to believe that you're there to help your client. I describe what I do and what we do at Sage Partners, what I did back at Deloitte Consulting, is we're a helping profession. Now, maybe not at the same level as a gifted neuroscientist or a committed academic or a psychotherapist, right? But we're there to say, you've got a problem. I'm going to help you solve the problem. I'm here to help. See, there's a cynical view of the world, and that is, oh, what the hell? These folks are going to spend a couple $1 million. Might as well spend it with me. I
Yeah.
get upset at that.
Yeah, good faith, goodwill is always important, good intentions, and
Yes.
purity. Just being a good person leads you a very long way. How do you dig deep into it? Because there's the 5 whys framework, but sometimes it's more like 15 or 25 whys.
Right.
How do you dive that deep? Is it just about being a good researcher? I personally use a lot of AI tools nowadays, like
Sure.
deep research.
Yes.
And is it about creativity? How do you get really to the bottom problem? And I believe you also need to be willing to have these hard conversations, right? Because if the client is like, it has a big ego and is like, no, that's not the problem. But if that's really the problem as a consultant, how do you actually convince them that it is so?
Well, first of all, it does take a lot of research, because context is really important. So you have to understand where your particular client, where that company is today. So you do need to do a lot of research. Some of it's external, but some of it is by working inside, looking at the financial data, talking to people, seeing what's on their mind and what's important. And all those things come together. But the other thing you have to understand is that ultimately, probably, most likely, you're going to have a tough conversation, but you can't have that too soon. You can't have it until the client actually trusts you. So you need to build some trust. So you need to solve some problem, maybe not the central problem, but some problem, so that they can say, aha, you understand who I am and all that. And that's why I've always said, when we're putting our teams together and you're working with a new client, that first presentation, we're giving feedback to the client, boy, that is dangerous. They expect you to know something. You don't know it all yet. You may not, in fact, know the most important thing. So you have to find some way to be insightful, but not block yourself off from further inquiry.
And like any good detective would, they would interview various people, right?
Yes.
In the org, how do you actually do that? Do you need permission? Do you
Yeah.
need to win all their trust first? How do you go with that?
Yeah, first of all, you do need permission. And once you have permission, you talk to the first group of folks. If you've done it well, and if the feedback is that these people are asking good questions, they're listening to me, that sort of thing, you can then strike out on your own. They'll give you a list of these people to talk to, but then you realize that somebody said, you really ought to talk to Joni over there, because she has a different perspective. And once you've established that base load of trust, and it really is important to say, I'm listening, I'm giving you feedback, I'm asking good questions, and then you have a chance to dig into what's important.
And how do you actually ask good questions?
Well, this is part of the art as well as the science of it, right? So the first thing is that you don't want to ask what I refer to as a stupid question. You don't want to ask a question of somebody you should have known coming in. I'll give you a simple example. Years ago, we were recruiting a fellow from a very well-known business school back at our firm, Braxton. And we had on their business school website and all that, all kinds of information about us. So this fellow was a pretty good person, looked like we might like him. He said to me, well, do you have an office in London? I'd like to work there. He was done, because of course we had an office in London. And of course we put that right in front of him. So you don't want to ask the dumb question. So that's sort of the important thing. And then you start sort of figuring out sort of what are the issues here. And we come to the framework, right? And there are by this time in our life, we've seen lots of things. We kind of use a tagline, we've been there, done that, right? So we have a lot of background, and it's not too hard to figure out where you want to be probing with your questions.
Right. Well, it's like prompting Chat GPT, right? The smarter you
Right.
are, the smarter the
Right.
questions, the
Right.
smarter its answer. You pick up that smart answer, the smarter question. So it's like an infinite loop, right?
It is. And I must confess, I'm a user of ChatGPT as opposed to one of the others. I have the pro version. And whenever I'm writing sort of something I want to be short, I use it. It's really good. Longer stuff is not so good. But I do the always. By the way, I always do the first draft. I never say, "Hey, can you give me some ideas about whatever?" Uh, that's a fool's errand. I start off with a set of ideas and then say, "Can you help me make this more persuasive?"
Right. And sometimes our brain are not in their highest capacity, right? So it's fine
Yeah,
to ask it a stupid question every now and
yeah,
then and
right.
ask GPT, how could I have asked a better question
True.
and get sort of meta about it. But I found it incredibly helpful to dive really deep into topics. For example, AGI that's going to be upon us in a couple of years from now. We're going to create this super intelligence, right? Have you started seeing AI being commonly adopted in your field? And what about agents? Have you started seeing agents that will act on your behalf? AIs that will act on your behalf and create even more value.
So the first part of your question, yes, we're seeing everybody, not everybody, but almost everybody experimenting with one way or another how AI can help. I like it that at first it was all about how AI can help us improve productivity, doing the same with fewer people, fewer resources, all of that. But now people are starting to look at the opportunity side. What else could I do that I'm not now doing that would be good for my company, good for my firm? And I think that's important. And agents, not so much yet. Little experimentation, but right now, broadly speaking, there's not enough confidence in the agents themselves to have it be, well, at least used in at a senior level. We're working at the C-suite level, and so at that level, just not it's not there yet.
Right.
They're not comfortable yet.
And can you see a future Deloitte, a couple of partners at the top, and fully AI agents as consultant that will deliver the value?
Somewhere down the line, sure, perhaps, right. Yeah, yeah. And I do think it's still there's this aspect of creativity because what AI is doing, right, is gathering collective wisdom of everything that's been said by everybody ever, right? But there's a certain matter of trying to find something that is not sort of standard. And right now, AI is not as good at that, right? And so I think eventually, sure, eventually, yes. And I'm not sure how we're going to handle that because that's going to be difficult when the beast is more creative than the master. That's going to be tough. I don't know how it's going to work, but we're trying to figure it out. We're trying to figure it out.
Tell me a bit more about your podcast, why you
Yeah,
decided to start it, what was your thesis behind it, and what have you
sure.
got of it so far?
Sure. So it's called Focus on Growth, Sage Insights. I did 15 episodes last year, the first year, and I've got 3 of them published and several more ready to go now. And it has two folds. One is, we're a company, and so part of it is to increase our brand awareness. So we refer to that because we're smaller than the big box, the BCGs, the McKinseys. We need to punch above our weight. So it helps us do that. But I'm at a stage also in my career where I have things to say to people like you and people who are younger in their career. And I want to give back, play it forward. I want to share some of my insights, even if it's not going to generate a dollar's worth of revenue for us at Sage. And that's okay, right? And I just find that really excites me. And of my 15 episodes, 2 of them I would put in the category of playing it forward as opposed to brand enhancement.
Yeah, I love that. And I guess that most of your peers aren't doing that. Most of them are already retired. So what is that special spice with you, like constantly on the
Uh,
lookout for innovation and trying to not
yeah.
bore yourself out of retirement?
No. I've always been a curious person, and I learned a long time ago from some really smart people that if you like what you're doing and you can keep on doing it, you got to keep on doing it. Good friend of mine is a surgeon. He was a surgeon. He was a college football player and had all kinds of injuries. And it came to be that he couldn't stand in front of an operating table and do a 6-hour, 8-hour operation. He had to retire. This is not physical. This is mental. And I think I can do this for quite a while. My father, for example, was still writing, and he published 55 stories or articles from the day he, quote, retired from business in 65 until he died at 94. So my reaction is, okay, I'm going to give that a shot. I don't know if I'll quite get there, but I'm going to give that a shot.
That's quite incredible.
I do have something to say.
And who was your father? Did he inspired you to pursue what you even pursue today?
Well, not exactly. Not exactly. When I was going to undergraduate school, college, he said, well, you got to be an engineer because engineers always have a job. And he was right. So I was an engineer. But then I flipped and I went to business school, which caught him off guard. And then I flipped and went from, I was going to choose between going to an industrial marketing company called 3M, a consumer marketing company called Procter & Gamble. Which one should I choose? And all of a sudden, I did a strange thing called consulting. And so, well, wait a minute, right? But it worked out. And I found that if you are good at what you do and you like it, you'll spend a lot of time getting better at it and you'll be successful. And that's kind of an important thing. You sort of pick what it is you like to do, dedicate yourself to it, and you're going to find success.
Right. And your engineering studies, did you retain that engineering mindset, which is deconstructing things and rebuilding them?
Oh, yeah. The analytical side of what I do came from engineering. When I walked into business school, I was way ahead of some of the folks who were from the arts and sciences curriculum because I knew how to do things. I knew how to, as you put, take things apart. And all the work I've done, not all the work, but most of it has had a strong a bit of analysis, trying to figure out what the story is, what it means, what is related to what, that sort of thing. Yeah, and that was really important. So I was not actually, I guess you might say, a practicing engineer because I became a consultant almost right away. But I used all the principles and all the background I learned forever.
And where does creativity and arts come into this? Is it about taking more risk and trying out new stuff more on the innovation side in the consulting space?
It is. And it's also being not closed off to other ideas. Somebody else can come up with a good idea. Maybe there's something you can do with that. Don't close yourself off to it. And I do read a lot. I read both in the business area, but I read psychology, I read social sciences. I actually read fiction because I find in reading fiction, you get these sort of strange ideas. Where did that come from? How did they come to that conclusion? And it can inspire creativity. Plus, I enjoy music, and I have in the background classical music on, but I'm a lover of jazz also, and various forms of popular music. And so I find that those are creative activities. One thing, if I might mention, if you've ever followed the Beatles, we all know the Beatles, right? The last thing they did was Peter Jackson did a long documentary about how they put together their final concert, as it were, Get Back. And if you look at that, that is actually all about creativity because they didn't know what they were going to do. And you watch John and Paul particularly sorting out, this works, that doesn't work, how about this? And then George or Ringo pops in with something, and then the producer, George Martin, said, oh, wait a minute, how about this? And so the creative activity, the creative act, it is just incredible. It's hard to program. But it is about being open to other stimuli as opposed to what you're comfortable with.
Yeah, I like that. That's incredible. What legacy are you leaving to this world? You feel that you're done also leaving this legacy, or you're still working on it?
Oh no, I believe and I hope, as long as my, knock on wood, my health holds up. I've got quite a bit of runway. You have to go. I'm in good health and all that. I exercise, I take care of myself and all that. So it should go for a while. But if I have a legacy, it's to help people understand that change happens. And sometimes change is frightening. Right now, it's frightening. You get AI, quantum computing, synthetic biology. We don't even know what's going to happen with stuff that we trigger that way. And it is very confusing. You have social media where a small number of people, fringe people, can have ideas that are just totally disruptive. How do you handle that? And then, of course, there's the geopolitics all involved. Who's on first? Who's leading? What's this? And so the legacy is to say that we face these kinds of challenges, this kind of change. It is the human condition. So we got to figure out how we're going to make our play as individuals and in our organizations, how we're going to make it work, because ignoring it, that ain't going to work. So you need to get in the mix. You need to get in there and find out how you can influence what's coming, but also how you can have your own role in it. So that would be my legacy. Hey, don't fight change, understand it, deal with it, and get involved.
I love that. What are your mental frameworks not to get overwhelmed with all this information and noise?
Mental frameworks in terms of,
Just filtering all the noise out there. Like if you open your LinkedIn feed, you'll see all these posts. If you open
sure,
Apple News, then I think newspaper are even worse
sure,
nowadays. So there's
sure.
lots of noise. How do you filter the good from the bad, and how do you keep your focus and your clarity?
That's a good point. And so I try to maintain a few guiding principles. I want to be curious. I want to listen to the other side of the argument. There's a psychologist from a Wharton School at University of Pennsylvania, Adam Grant, and he says you should make your case as if you're right. You should listen as if you're wrong. So I try to do that. But I must admit, sometimes when the noise goes, I just turn it off, right? I just turn it off. So I put on one of my jazz records, or I watch a football game or a basketball game or something like that, and just to sort of coast. Because sometimes you have to say, "Oh, wait a minute, I've had enough." I just have to calm myself down and step aside.
As someone that's seen a lot and that has a great business mind, I need to ask you about the tariffs. What's your
Sure,
opinion on that?
sure, totally appropriate question. And so the tariffs has two part to it. So one part is, and you're from originally from Quebec, uh, the the tariff on cheese from Vermont going to Quebec is 300%. So a Vermont dairy farmer has a $5 piece of cheese. It costs him $20 to send it in Quebec. That's not right. That's just not right. So you got to sort that one out. On the other hand, I believe that if you have solid ground, people are sort of playing by reasonable rules, and a particular thing can be done better, cheaper, and all that somewhere else, you should buy it. And so I really get worried about not so much about the tariffs, because I think they're a bargaining point of view. What I get worried about is this concern about the trade deficit, right? If we have a trade deficit with Vietnam because they can make good, cheap T-shirts, oh, come on, really? That's totally fine. If in fact the Germans can make better automobiles, that's okay, right? Now there are some things from a national security point of view we have to do close to home, just in case. So I'm in favor of that. So I hope this noise that's going on about tariffs is really saber rattling to try to get to some sort of a, relatively speaking, even playing field. But do not try to go to this zero balance of trade. That's totally absurd, and that frankly worries me a lot.
Right. And as an experienced leader, is that how you would negotiate, like balls on the table, sort of take my way or the highway? Is objectively, do you think it's a good business strategy to negotiate that way?
It seems to work well for our current president Trump, but I've done a lot of negotiations with clients, and particularly in M&A, where I'm on one side of the table, or the other, trying to convince somebody to sell to us, or me representing another company, trying to get them to sell to the other. And I find that sort of in your face, it wears on you, and it gets old quickly. And I'd rather say, let's see if we can find a way to understand what you want, what we want, and if we can put it together. If we can't, it's okay. We move on. But maybe there's some way we can figure out how to make this thing work. And so I'm much more of a, let's focus on how we can collaborate, how we can each get something we want. And I like that whole thing better. And I think over time, it has better results.
Yes, more win-win. And yeah, it doesn't only feel more human, more nice, but it's also more
Sure.
productive for
Yeah.
both parties. Tom, where can we find out more about you?
Sure. Well, certainly. You can reach me at tdoorley@sagepartners.net. You can reach me on LinkedIn, where I'm located, or my Sage Partners website, which is www.sagepartners.net. All three of those would get you to me.
So that was Tom Doorley and Charles Cormier.